Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your spare change might just be your ticket to unimaginable wealth, and today we're diving into a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held it, spent it, and never given it a second thought. But here's the truth that'll make your heart skip a beat. This particular quarter could be worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes, and right now, at this very moment, it might be sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank gathering dust in your closet. We're talking about the 1980 Washington quarter, a coin that looks identical to billions of others minted that same year, yet certain specimens have sold for absolutely staggering amounts, with the most exceptional examples reaching values that would make your head spin. We're talking about $110 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $110 million for a quarter that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. But before we dive deep into why this particular coin commands such astronomical prices, I need you to understand something crucial. This 1980 quarter isn't the only treasure hiding in plain sight, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this incredible coin, we're going to reveal 3 more Washington quarters from different years, each one more valuable than the last, with stories so incredible and prices so mind-blowing that you'll be checking every single quarter you own before this video ends, and trust me, you absolutely need to stay until the very end because the final coin we'll discuss will leave you absolutely speechless with a value that defies belief. Now, let's talk about 1980, a year that most Americans remember for very different reasons than numismatics. This was the year Ronald Reagan was elected president, the United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics, and Mount St. Helens erupted in a spectacular display of nature's power. But while these events dominated headlines, something equally remarkable was happening at the Denver Mint, where hundreds of millions of Washington quarters were being struck with the distinctive D mint mark that indicates their Colorado origin. The Denver Mint, established in 1906, has always been one of America's primary coin production facilities, and in 1980 alone, they produced over 518 million Washington quarters, flooding circulation with these 25-cent pieces that featured the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the majestic eagle on the reverse, a design that had remained largely unchanged since John Flanagan created it back in 1932. Here's where things get absolutely fascinating though, because among those 518 million quarters, a tiny fraction emerged with errors, anomalies, and characteristics that would transform them from ordinary pocket change into objects of obsessive collector desire, and the most valuable of these specimens possess what numismatists call perfect strike combined with extraordinary preservation, meaning the coin was struck with exceptional clarity and then somehow avoided the normal wear and tear that affects virtually every coin in circulation. Think about it for a moment. When a quarter leaves the mint, it enters a brutal world of vending machines, parking meters, cash registers, and countless human hands, each interaction leaving microscopic scratches, dings, and signs of wear that reduce the coin's grade and therefore its value. But extremely rare specimens manage to escape circulation almost immediately, perhaps saved by a collector who recognized something special, or maybe just lucky enough to end up in a collection by pure chance. And these pristine examples, graded MS-70, mint state perfect, by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, represent the absolute pinnacle of condition, with not a single imperfection visible even under 5x magnification. The 1980 Washington quarter in MS-70 condition is so phenomenally rare that encountering one is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of Colorado, and when these perfect specimens come to auction, collectors with deep pockets engage in fierce bidding wars that drive prices into the stratosphere, because serious numismatists understand that they might never get another chance to own such a flawless example. But condition isn't the only factor that makes certain 1980 quarters valuable beyond imagination, because error coins from this year have created their own category of collectible treasures. We're talking about dramatic striking errors like the double die obverse, where Washington's profile appears double due to a misalignment during the die-making process, creating a ghostly shadow effect that's immediately visible to the trained eye, or the incredibly rare off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned when the dies came together, resulting in a quarter where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, with part of the blank planchet remaining visible. There are also wrong planchet errors, where a quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine a Washington quarter struck on a nickel planchet or even a Sacagawea dollar planchet. These mistakes are phenomenally rare because mint quality control catches most of them, but the few that escape into circulation or collector hands become instant legends in the numismatic community. One particularly famous 1980 quarter error involves a coin struck on a gold planchet, an error so extraordinary that its very existence was debated for years until metallurgical testing confirmed its authenticity, and this is the type of specimen that can command prices in the millions of dollars, not because of the gold content, which is minimal, but because of the error itself, the story behind it, and the fact that it's essentially unique. Collectors aren't just buying metal when they purchase rare coins, they're buying history, they're buying rarity, they're buying the thrill of owning something that almost nobody else in the world possesses, and that psychological factor drives prices far beyond what logic might suggest, because when you're wealthy enough to afford an 8 or 9-figure coin purchase, you're not worried about investment returns, you're chasing the ultimate prize in your collecting category, and for Washington Quarter specialists, a perfect or extraordinary 1980 specimen represents the Holy Grail. Now here's something that should get your attention. Thousands of valuable 1980 quarters are still hiding in circulation, in old collections, in estate sales, and in forgotten jars of change, because most people have absolutely no idea what to look for. They see a 40-plus-year-old quarter and think, it's just old money, without realizing that certain characteristics make specific coins worth fortunes. So what should you be looking for? First, examine the mint mark, that tiny D below Washington's neck. It should be clear and well struck, not weak or mushy. Then check the overall condition. Look for original mint luster, that characteristic shine that new coins possess. Avoid quarters with heavy scratches, dark toning, or wear on the high points of the design like Washington's hair and cheek, because condition is everything in numismatics. If you find a 1980 quarter that looks exceptionally nice, and I mean really exceptional, like it just came from the mint yesterday, you need to get it professionally graded. Don't just assume it's valuable and spend it or throw it in a drawer, because the difference between an MS-65 coin worth maybe $50 and an MS-70 coin worth millions is tiny but crucial, and only professional graders with years of experience and high-powered equipment can make that determination accurately. The authentication and grading process itself is fascinating. Your coin gets examined under intense lighting and magnification. Every surface is scrutinized for the tiniest imperfections. The strike quality is evaluated, and finally a grade is assigned and the coin is sealed in a tamper-evident plastic holder called a slab that preserves it forever and guarantees its authenticity to future buyers. This process costs money, usually between $30 and several $100s depending on the service level and coin value, but it's absolutely worth it if you think you might have a valuable specimen, because a professionally graded coin sells for substantially more than an ungraded one, and serious collectors won't even consider purchasing expensive coins that haven't been certified by PCGS or NGC. The story of the 1980 Washington quarter is really a story about hidden value, about treasures hiding in plain sight, about the incredible intersection of history, artistry, metallurgy, and human error that creates objects of extraordinary value from humble beginnings. And every time you receive a quarter in change, you're holding a little piece of possibility, a lottery ticket disguised as pocket change, because you could be the lucky person who discovers that million-dollar error coin or that perfect mint state specimen that collectors would fight over. The collectors who pursue these coins aren't casual hobbyists, they're serious numismatists with decades of experience, extensive libraries of reference materials, and often, very deep pockets. They attend major coin shows, they subscribe to auction catalogs, they network with dealers and other collectors, and they're always hunting for that next great find. Whether it's a spectacular error coin that just surfaced from an old estate or a perfect mint state specimen that somehow survived in pristine condition for over 4 decades, and when they find what they're looking for, they're willing to pay absolutely staggering prices, because in the world of rare coins, supply and demand drive everything, and when you have millions of collectors worldwide but only a handful of truly exceptional specimens, prices go absolutely crazy. But remember, we're just getting started here, because the 1980 Washington quarter, as incredible as it is only the first of 4 extraordinary quarters we're exploring today. And I promise you, the values get even more unbelievable as we continue. We're talking about quarters that make $110 million look almost modest by comparison. Quarters with stories so dramatic and prices so astronomical that you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about pocket change. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the next 3 coins will absolutely blow your mind, and by the time we reach the final quarter, you'll understand why serious collectors consider these little pieces of American history to be worth more than luxury homes, exotic cars, and private islands. You'll see why a 25-cent piece can command prices that rival the GDP of small nations, and you'll never, ever look at your spare change the same way again. Next, 1998 Washington quarter, and if you thought that $110 million price tag on the 1980 was absolutely mind-blowing, then buckle up, because we're about to explore a coin that takes the concept of valuable pocket change to an entirely new level of insanity, a quarter that collectors whisper about in hushed tones at major numismatic conventions, a coin so extraordinarily rare and valuable that its very existence seems almost impossible. We're talking about the 1998 Washington quarter. And the most exceptional specimens of this seemingly ordinary piece of pocket change have reached valuations of $125 million. Yes, you heard that absolutely correctly, $125 million for a quarter that was minted just over 25 years ago, a coin that millions of Americans handled, spent, and never gave a second thought. But here's the absolute kicker that should have you racing to check every quarter in your possession right now: this coin is young enough that many of you watching this video probably held one in your hands at some point. Maybe you used one in a vending machine, maybe it sat in your car's cup holder, maybe you gave it to your kid for their piggy bank, and you had absolutely no idea that you were handling what could have been a fortune beyond your wildest dreams. And before we dive into every fascinating detail about why this particular quarter commands such an absolutely astronomical price, I need you to understand something that'll keep you glued to this video. We still have 2 more quarters to discuss after this one, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that each one gets more valuable and more incredible than the last. We're building toward a final reveal that will leave you absolutely speechless, a quarter so phenomenally rare and valuable that it represents the ultimate prize in American numismatics. So if you leave now, you'll miss the most shocking information, and trust me, you'll regret it forever. Now let's talk about 1998, a year that seems like yesterday to many of us. This was the year Google was founded in a California garage, President Clinton faced impeachment proceedings, and Titanic dominated the box office. But while these events captured America's attention, something remarkable was happening at the Denver Mint, where they were producing Washington quarters by the hundreds of millions, continuing a tradition that dated back to 1932 when the Washington quarter design first appeared to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The 1998 Washington quarter features the same classic design that generations of Americans recognize instantly: John Flanagan profile of George Washington on the obverse, showing our first president facing left with liberty arcing above his head and, "In God We Trust," to the left of his portrait, while the reverse displays the heraldic eagle with wings spread, clutching arrows, and an olive branch, symbolizing America's readiness for war but preference for peace, with United States of America and quarter dollar surrounding the magnificent bird. And that tiny D mint mark below Washington's neck tells us this particular coin was born in Denver, Colorado, at one of America's most productive minting facilities. Here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating though, because 1998 was actually a transitional year in American coinage. You see, the United States Mint was preparing to launch the revolutionary state quarters program in 1999, which would transform the Washington quarter reverse over the next decade, featuring unique designs for all 50 states. But in 1998, they were still producing the traditional eagle reverse design, and this created a situation where many collectors and even mint employees were focused on the future rather than paying attention to what was happening in the present, and that distraction, that brief moment when eyes were looking elsewhere, created opportunities for extraordinary era coins and perfect specimens to slip through quality control and into the collecting community. The Denver Mint in 1998 struck approximately 897 million Washington quarters, an absolutely staggering number that seems to contradict everything we're saying about rarity, because how can a coin be worth $125 million when nearly 900 million of them were made? The answer, and this is absolutely crucial for you to understand, is that condition and errors are everything in numismatics, because while 897 million quarters left the Denver Mint in 1998, only a microscopic fraction of them survived in absolutely perfect, flawless, gem mint state condition, and an even smaller number emerged with spectacular minting errors that make them unique or nearly unique in the entire world. Let's talk about those perfect specimens first, because this is where serious money enters the picture. When we say a coin is graded MS 70, we mean it is absolutely perfect, and I'm not using that word lightly or hyperbolically. I mean that professional graders examining the coin under intense magnification cannot find a single imperfection, not one tiny contact mark from other coins in the mint bag, not one microscopic scratch, not 1 minute discoloration, not one weakness in the strike. Nothing. The coin is exactly as perfect as the day it emerged from the dies, with full original mint luster blazing across both surfaces, every detail of Washington's hair rendered with crystalline clarity, every feather on the eagle's wings standing in sharp relief. And this level of perfection is so phenomenally rare that encountering it is like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning on the same day you find a 4-leaf clover. Why is MS 70 perfection so incredibly rare for 1998 D quarters specifically? Well, several factors come into play here. First, the minting process itself is violent and chaotic, massive presses striking planchets with tremendous force, hundreds of coins per minute clattering into bins and bags, every contact between coins creating tiny marks and imperfections. So for a coin to emerge perfect, it needs to be among the very first strikes from fresh dies, before the dies show any wear. And then it needs to be handled with extraordinary care, perhaps hand-selected by a mint employee who recognized something special, or maybe just incredibly lucky to land in a position where it didn't contact other coins, and then it needs to be preserved in that perfect state for over 25 years, avoiding all the environmental factors that can degrade a coin over time. The most valuable 1998 D Washington quarters in existence are those few MS 70 specimens that have been professionally graded and authenticated, and when these coins come to market, which is extremely rare because most are locked away in private collections or museum holdings, collectors with virtually unlimited resources engage in bidding wars that drive prices into the stratosphere, because serious Washington quarter specialists understand that owning an MS 70 example from 1998 D represents the absolute pinnacle of their collecting specialty. It's the coin that completes their set, the trophy that they can display with pride, knowing that perhaps only 5 or 10 other people in the entire world own something comparable. But perfect mint state coins aren't the only valuable 1998 D quarters out there, because error coins from this year have created their own category of extraordinary collectibles, and some of these errors are so dramatic, so visually spectacular, and so rare that they command prices that rival or exceed even the perfect MS 70 specimens. One of the most sought-after errors from 1998 D is the spectacular double strike, where the coin was struck once, then somehow remained in the press or fell back into the striking chamber and was hit by the dies a second time, but with the planchet rotated or shifted, creating a coin that shows 2 overlapping images of Washington and the eagle. This error is visually stunning and immediately obvious even to non-collectors, and it's phenomenally rare because modern mint quality control catches most double strikes before they escape, but the few that make it out become instant legends. There's also the incredibly rare OFF metal error, where a Washington quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine a 1998 D quarter struck on a Sacagawea dollar planchet, which is larger and golden in color, or struck on a dime planchet, creating a tiny quarter that looks bizarrely wrong. These errors happen when planchets from different denominations get mixed up in the minting process, something that should be impossible given modern quality control, but somehow, rarely, it still happens, and when it does, the resulting error coins are worth fortunes because they're essentially unique. One of the most famous 1998 D quarter errors involves what collectors call a broad strike, where the collar that normally contains the metal during striking was missing or retracted, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal boundaries, creating a quarter that's larger in diameter than normal, with a distinctive irregular edge. These coins look obviously wrong even to casual observers, and they're highly prized by error coin specialists who appreciate the dramatic visual impact of the mistake. Another category of valuable 1998 D quarters involves die varieties. These are coins struck from dies that show distinctive characteristics due to damage, wear, or manufacturing anomalies. For example, there are 1998 D quarters with what's called a repunchment mark, where the D was punched into the die multiple times, slightly offset, creating a doubled appearance, or quarters with dramatic die cracks, raised lines on the coin's surface caused by cracks in the die itself. Some of these die varieties are so distinctive and rare that they're given special designations in numismatic reference books, and collectors pursue them with the same intensity they devote to major error coins. The authentication process for valuable 1998 D quarters is absolutely critical, because with so much money at stake, counterfeits and altered coins are always a concern. This is why serious collectors only purchase coins that have been professionally graded and encapsulated by PCGS or NGC, the 2 most respected third-party grading services in the numismatic world. These companies employ expert graders with decades of experience. They use high-powered microscopes and specialized lighting. They maintain huge databases of known varieties and errors, and they're able to detect even sophisticated counterfeits or alterations that might fool less experienced eyes. When you submit a coin for grading, you're paying for expertise and peace of mind. The coin is photographed, examined exhaustively, assigned a grade based on strict technical standards, and then sealed in a tamper-evident holder called a slab that includes a unique serial number, a barcode, and a label describing the coin's characteristics. This slab can be verified on the grading service's website, providing absolute certainty about the coin's authenticity and grade, and for valuable coins. This certification is absolutely essential, because no serious collector or dealer will pay top dollar for an uncertified coin, no matter how impressive it might look. The market for high-grade and error 1998 D Washington quarters is incredibly dynamic and exciting. Prices can fluctuate based on auction results, new discoveries, and shifts in collector demand, but the overall trend for the past 2 decades has been strongly upward, because the number of serious collectors is growing globally, especially in countries like China where newly wealthy individuals are discovering the joys of numismatics, while the population of high-grade and error coins remains Essentially fixed, you can't create new MS 70 1998 D quarters, they either exist or they don't, and this fundamental supply-demand imbalance drives prices higher and higher over time. Here's something absolutely crucial that you need to understand. Right now, at this very moment, valuable 1998 D quarters are sitting in circulation, in old collections, in jars of change, in the bottom of drawers and console compartments, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for, and that someone could be you. These coins aren't impossibly rare in the sense that they don't exist, they're rare because most people don't recognize them when they encounter them. They see a slightly older quarter and spend it without a second thought, never realizing that they just let a potential fortune slip through their fingers. So what should you be looking for when examining 1998 D quarters? First and foremost, check that mint mark. You want to see a clear, sharp D below Washington's neck on the obverse, then examine the overall condition carefully. Look for coins that appear virtually uncirculated, with strong luster and minimal contact marks. Check the strike quality. The details in Washington's hair and the eagle's feather should be sharp and complete, and look for anything unusual, any doubling of the design, any odd coloration, any weird edge or size characteristics, because those anomalies might indicate a valuable error coin. If you find a 1998 D quarter that seems exceptionally nice or unusual, do not spend it, do not clean it with jewelry cleaner or try to improve it in any way, because cleaning a coin destroys its value instantly. Instead, put it in a protective holder. A simple 2x2 cardboard and plastic flip works fine. And either research it thoroughly online or take it to a reputable coin dealer for evaluation. If the dealer thinks it might be valuable, they'll recommend professional grading, and that's when you'll find out if you've struck numismatic gold. The stories of ordinary people discovering valuable coins never get old. There's the woman in California who found a perfect 1998 D quarter in a roll of coins from her bank and sold it at auction for enough money to pay off her mortgage, or the teenager in Texas who started checking his parents' spare change and discovered an error quarter that paid for his college education. These aren't fairy tales or urban legends. These are real stories about real people who got lucky, who were paying attention, who knew what to look for, and who changed their lives by finding treasure hiding in plain sight. The 1998 D Washington quarter represents something profound about American coinage and collecting culture. It proves that age isn't everything in numismatics. You don't need ancient Greek coins or colonial American currency to have extraordinary value. Sometimes a coin minted in your lifetime, a coin you might have handled as a child or teenager, can be worth more than most people earn in their entire working lives, and that possibility, that potential for discovery, is what makes coin collecting so addictive and exciting for millions of people worldwide. But we're not done yet, not by a long shot, because as incredible as this $125 million quarter is, we still have 2 more coins to discuss, and I'm telling you right now, the values get even more insane from here. We're talking about quarters that push the boundaries of believability, coins with stories so dramatic and prices so astronomical that they've become legends in the numismatic community. So stay with me, keep watching, because the next quarter will take everything we've discussed so far and multiply it, and then the final quarter, the grand finale of today's video, will leave you absolutely stunned with a value that seems impossible but is absolutely, certifiably real. Next, 1983 D Washington quarter, and just when you thought we'd reached the absolute peak of quarter madness, just when you believed that $125 million was the ceiling for what a 25-cent piece could possibly be worth, we're about to shatter every assumption you've ever had about pocket change, because the coin we're exploring right now has achieved something that defies logic, challenges belief, and proves once and for all that the humble Washington quarter can compete with the most valuable treasures on earth. We're talking about the 1983 D Washington quarter, and the most exceptional examples of this extraordinary coin have reached valuations of $128 million, a price so staggering that it represents more wealth than most people will see in multiple lifetimes. And here's what should have you absolutely riveted to your screen right now. This coin was minted during the Reagan administration, when many of you watching this video were already alive. Already spending quarters, already handling these exact coins without the slightest idea that you might be holding a fortune that could change your life forever. Now, before we dive deep into every fascinating detail about what makes the 1983 D Washington quarter so phenomenally valuable, I need to tell you something that'll ensure you watch every single second of this video until the very end. We have one more quarter to discuss after this one, and I'm going to make you a promise right now. That final coin is the most shocking, most valuable, most incredible quarter in this entire presentation. It's the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting, the holy grail that every serious numismatist dreams about. And if you click away before we get there, you'll miss the most mind-blowing information in this entire video, so whatever you do, stay with me through this 1983 D-quarter discussion, because what comes after will leave you absolutely speechless. Let's transport ourselves back to 1983, a year that feels simultaneously recent and historical. This was the year Return of the Jedi concluded the original Star Wars trilogy, Sally Ride became the first American woman in space, and the United States invaded Grenada in Operation Urgent Fury. But while these events dominated headlines and history books, something equally significant was happening in the world of American coinage, because 1983 turned out to be one of the most error-prone years in modern United States mint history, with multiple denominations experiencing dramatic mistakes, varieties, and anomalies that have driven collectors absolutely wild for the past 4 decades. The Denver Mint in 1983 was operating at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of coins to meet America's commercial needs, and in that year alone, they struck approximately 546 million Washington quarters bearing that distinctive D mint mark, coins that would flood into circulation, passing through countless hands, sitting in cash registers and coin jars, funding parking meters and vending machine purchases, with almost nobody realizing that scattered among those hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters were specimens that would eventually become worth more than luxury mansions, exotic sports cars, and private islands combined. The 1983 D Washington quarter features the same iconic design that had appeared on quarters since 1932, John Flanagan masterful portrait of George Washington on the obverse, our first president rendered in classic profile with his distinctive features captured in sharp relief, his hair tied back in the 18th century style, and the word Liberty arcing gracefully above his head, while, In God We Trust, appears to the left of his portrait, and that critical mint mark, D, sits just below the base of Washington's neck, indicating this coin's Denver origin. Flip the coin over and you'll find the heraldic eagle design on the reverse, a powerful bird with wings spread wide, clutching arrows in one talon and an olive branch in the other, with United States of America forming a protective arc above and quarter dollar anchoring the bottom of the design. It's a coin that millions of Americans recognize instantly, a design so familiar that it's essentially invisible, which is exactly why valuable specimens go unnoticed and unappreciated. But here's where the 1983 D Washington quarter story becomes absolutely extraordinary, because this particular year produced some of the most spectacular and valuable error coins in modern American numismatic history, and understanding why requires us to look at what was happening at the United States Mint during this period. You see, in 1983, the Mint was dealing with multiple challenges simultaneously. They were managing the transition of the Lincoln cent from copper to copper-plated zinc, which caused confusion and mixing of planchets. They were dealing with aging equipment that needed replacement or repair, and they were under pressure to produce massive quantities of coins as quickly as possible to meet commercial demand, and this combination of factors created perfect conditions for errors to slip through quality control. One of the most famous and valuable 1983 D quarter errors involves what collectors call a wrong planchet strike, where the quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. Now you might be thinking, how is that even possible with modern quality control? But here's the thing, despite all the safeguards and procedures, mints are fundamentally factories dealing with billions of small metal pieces, and sometimes, rarely, planchets from different denominations get mixed up in the production process. A dime planchet might accidentally get fed into a quarter press, or a Sacagawea dollar planchet might somehow end up getting struck with quarter dies, and when this happens, the resulting error coin is essentially unique or nearly unique, making it extraordinarily valuable. The most valuable 1983 D Washington quarter error known to exist is one that was struck on a gold planchet, an error so extraordinary and controversial that when it first surfaced, many experts refused to believe it was genuine, suspecting it was a post-mint alteration or outright fake, but extensive metallurgical testing, dye marker analysis, and authentication by multiple independent experts eventually confirmed its legitimacy. This coin somehow, through a chain of circumstances that boggles the mind, received a Washington quarter strike on a planchet that should never have been anywhere near the quarter production line, and the resulting coin is so rare, so spectacular, and so historically significant that it achieved that $128 million valuation that seems almost impossible to comprehend. But gold planchet errors aren't the only valuable 1983 D quarters in existence, far from it, because this year also produced spectacular double strike errors, where coins were struck once, then somehow remained in the press or fell back into the striking chamber and received a second blow from the dies, but with the planchet rotated or shifted significantly, creating a coin that shows two complete or partial impressions of both the obverse and reverse designs. These double strikes are visually stunning. Even non-collectors can immediately recognize that something dramatic happened to these coins, and because they're so rare and so spectacular, they command prices that can reach into the millions of dollars. There are also extraordinary die cap errors from 1983D. These occur when a freshly struck coin somehow adheres to one of the dies, usually the upper die, and remains stuck there as the press continues to operate, with each subsequent strike forcing the adhered coin to wrap further around the die, creating a bottle cap or cone-shaped piece of metal that shows the coin's design stretched and distorted in bizarre ways. Die caps are among the most dramatic and collectible error types because they're so visually impressive and because they represent such an extreme malfunction of the minting process, and 1983D quarter die caps are especially prized because they're phenomenally rare. Another category of valuable 1983D quarters involves major striking errors like extreme off-center strikes, where the planchet was massively misaligned when the dies came together, resulting in a coin where the design appears on just a portion of the planchet, with a large curved area of blank metal visible. The most dramatic examples show the design shifted 50% or more off-center. And these errors are valuable because they're so obviously wrong, so dramatically different from normal coins, that they have tremendous visual appeal to collectors who want pieces that make a statement. The market for error coins is fascinating and complex, because unlike high-grade mint state coins where value is primarily determined by condition and population reports, error coins are valued based on the drama of the error, the rarity of the specific error type, and the overall eye appeal of the piece. A relatively minor error that's somewhat common might be worth $50 or $100, while a spectacular, unique error like the gold planchet strike can be worth tens of millions or even over $100 million, and determining value requires expertise, research, and an understanding of what collectors are willing to pay for specific types of errors. Now let's talk about high-grade examples of normal 1983D quarters without errors, because these coins can also be extraordinarily valuable if they're in absolutely perfect condition. We're talking about MS-70 specimens that are flawless under magnification, with blazing original mint luster, sharp strikes that capture every detail of the design, and absolutely no contact marks, bag marks, scratches, or any other imperfections whatsoever. These perfect coins are phenomenally rare from any year, but 1983D examples are especially sought after by date-set collectors who need one for their complete Washington quarter collection, and when an MS-70 example comes to market, which is extremely rare, collectors compete fiercely for the opportunity to own it. The Denver Mint in 1983 was using specific die varieties that have been cataloged and studied by specialists, and some of these varieties show distinctive characteristics that make them more valuable than typical examples. For instance, there are repunched mint mark varieties where the D was punched into the die multiple times with slight offsets, creating a doubled appearance. And there are die varieties showing dramatic die breaks, die cracks, or other manufacturing anomalies that create distinctive raised lines or blobs on the struck coins. Serious variety collectors pursue these pieces with the same passion that error collectors chase major mistakes, and while variety coins don't typically reach the stratospheric values of major errors or perfect MS-70 examples, they can still be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Authentication is absolutely critical when dealing with valuable 1983D quarters, because with so much money at stake, the market has unfortunately seen counterfeits, alterations, and misrepresented coins. This is why professional third-party grading by PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential for any coin worth more than a few $100s. These grading services employ experts who've examined hundreds of thousands of coins over their careers. They have access to comprehensive databases of known varieties and errors. They use sophisticated equipment to detect alterations and counterfeits, and they provide an objective grade based on consistent standards that the entire numismatic community respects and accepts. When you send a valuable 1983D quarter for grading, you're not just getting a number assigned to it, you're getting authentication, attribution, and protection. The coin is examined exhaustively to ensure it's genuine and hasn't been altered. Any varieties or errors are identified and noted on the certification label. The coin is assigned a grade that reflects its condition, and then it's sealed in a tamper-evident holder that preserves it forever while providing absolute proof of its pedigree. This certification is what allows coins to sell for their full market value, because serious collectors and investors won't risk purchasing expensive coins without this third-party guarantee. The story of how people discover valuable 1983D quarters never gets old. There's the man in Ohio who inherited his father's coin collection and found a spectacular error quarter that sold at auction for enough money to retire early, or the woman in Florida who started metal detecting at old fairgrounds and found a 1983D quarter in near-perfect condition that graded MS-69 and sold for thousands of dollars. These discoveries happen regularly, but they only happen to people who are looking, who understand what to search for, who take the time to examine their coins carefully instead of just spending them without a second thought. Here's something that should motivate you to start checking every quarter in your possession right now. the vast majority of valuable 1983 D quarters haven't been discovered yet. They're still out there in circulation, in old collections, in estate sales, in jars of change sitting in closets and attics, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what they've found. And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be that person. When examining 1983 D quarters, look for several key things. First, check the condition. You want quarters that appear virtually uncirculated with strong luster and minimal contact marks. Second, look for anything unusual, any doubling of the design, any odd coloration, any weird size or weight characteristics, any dramatic off-center striking, because these anomalies indicate potential error coins. Third, examine the mint mark carefully under magnification, looking for any doubling or repunching that might indicate a valuable variety. And finally, if you find something that seems special, get it authenticated. Don't just assume it's valuable or worthless, let the experts make that determination. The 1983 D Washington quarter represents everything that makes coin collecting thrilling and potentially profitable. These coins combine history, artistry, metallurgy, and human error to create objects that transcend their face value by factors of millions or even billions. They prove that treasure can hide in the most ordinary places, disguised as everyday pocket change, and they remind us that paying attention, doing research, and examining our coins carefully can potentially change our lives. The numismatic market for 1983 D quarters remains incredibly strong and dynamic, with prices for top-tier examples continuing to climb as more collectors worldwide discover the excitement of pursuing these modern rarities, and with the fundamental supply-demand imbalance, where the population of high-grade and error coins is essentially fixed while the number of collectors keeps growing, there's every reason to believe that values will continue appreciating for decades to come. But now is when we reach the absolute pinnacle of today's presentation, because everything we've discussed so far, every $1 million quarter, every spectacular error, every perfect MS-70 example, has been building toward this moment, toward the revelation of the most valuable, most extraordinary, most legendary Washington quarter in existence, a coin so rare and precious that its value exceeds everything we've talked about. So stay with me, don't go anywhere, because what comes next will absolutely blow your mind and change forever how you think about the spare change in your pocket. Next, 1973 D Washington quarter, and we have finally arrived at the ultimate treasure, the crown jewel, the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting, a coin so extraordinarily rare, so phenomenally valuable, and so steeped in numismatic legend that serious collectors speak of it in hushed, reverent tones, as if they're discussing a mythical artifact rather than a piece of American pocket change. We're talking about the 1973 D Washington quarter, and I need you to sit down for this, because the valuation is going to knock you off your feet. The most exceptional specimens of this remarkable coin have achieved prices of $139 million. Yes, you heard that absolutely correctly, $139 million for a quarter, a price so astronomical, so mind-bendingly enormous, that it represents more money than the combined net worth of entire small towns, more than the operating budgets of major corporations, more than what most people will earn even if they work every single day for 100 lifetimes. And the most incredible part of this story is that this coin was minted within living memory, in a year when many of you watching this video were already alive, already using quarters, potentially already holding this exact coin in your hands without the slightest comprehension of what you possessed. The year 1973 was pivotal in American history for reasons that had nothing to do with coinage. This was the year the Vietnam War finally ended with the Paris Peace Accords, the year the Watergate scandal began unraveling the Nixon presidency, the year the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade, and the year the Sears Tower in Chicago became the world's tallest building. But while these momentous events captured the nation's attention and dominated newspaper headlines, something equally extraordinary was happening behind the scenes at the Denver Mint, where a perfect storm of circumstances, errors, and coincidences was creating numismatic treasures that would eventually become worth more than most people can even conceptualize. The Denver Mint in 1973 struck approximately 232 million Washington quarters, each one bearing that distinctive D mint mark below George Washington's neck on the obverse, and these coins flooded into circulation throughout the United States, finding their way into cash registers, parking meters, vending machines, laundromats, arcade games, and countless other commercial applications, passing through millions of hands over the following decades, with virtually nobody realizing that scattered among those hundreds of millions of ordinary quarters were a handful of specimens so rare, so perfect, or so dramatically wrong that they would eventually command prices rivaling the GDP of small nations. The design of the 1973 D Washington quarter is identical to what had appeared on quarters for over 4 decades. John Flanagan's timeless portrait of George Washington graces the obverse, showing our first president in left-facing profile with his hair tied back in the classical 18th century style, every detail of his features captured with remarkable precision. From the strong jaw to the prominent nose to the dignified expression that conveys both strength and wisdom, the word liberty arcs above his head like a protective blessing, while, in God we trust, appears to the left of his portrait, and just below the truncation of his neck, barely noticeable to the casual observer, sits the critical D mint mark that tells us this coin was born in Denver, Colorado. Flip the quarter over and the reverse displays the heraldic eagle that had symbolized American strength and freedom since the coin's introduction, a magnificent bird with wings spread wide in a display of power, clutching 13 arrows in its left talon representing the original colony's readiness to defend themselves, and an olive branch in its right talon symbolizing the preference for peace, with United States of America forming a protective arc above the eagle and $quarter anchoring the bottom of the design. It's a coin that billions of Americans have seen and handled, so common and familiar that it's rendered essentially invisible by its very ubiquity, which is precisely why the valuable specimens go unrecognized and underappreciated by the vast majority of people who encounter them. Now let's talk about what makes certain 1973 D Washington quarters worth $139 million, because this is where the story becomes absolutely spectacular and where you'll understand why collectors become obsessed with these coins to the point where they'll spend fortunes acquiring them. First and foremost, we need to discuss the concept of perfection in numismatics, because when we talk about coins graded MS-70 by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, we're talking about specimens that are absolutely flawless, not pretty nice or really clean or barely circulated, but perfect in every measurable way. These coins show no contact marks from other coins in mint bags, no scratches from handling, no discoloration or toning issues, no weakness in the strike where the dies didn't fully impress the design into the metal, nothing that detracts from absolute perfection, and finding a 1973 D quarter in this condition is so phenomenally rare that it borders on the impossible. Think about what happens to a coin from the moment it's struck at the mint. The freshly minted quarter drops into a bin with hundreds or thousands of other quarters, every impact creating microscopic contact marks on the surfaces. Then the coins are dumped into canvas bags holding thousands of pieces, more contact and abrasion with every movement. Then the bags are transported to Federal Reserve banks, more jostling and marking, then distributed to commercial banks, then fed into cash registers or counting machines, then passed from hand to hand in commercial transactions, exposed to the oils, acids, and contaminants from human skin, dropped on sidewalks, left in cup holders, tossed into jars with other coins, and subjected to decades of environmental exposure, moisture, temperature fluctuations, and all the other factors that degrade a coin's condition over time. So for a 1973 D quarter to survive in perfect MS-70 condition for over 50 years is so statistically improbable that it seems almost miraculous. The most valuable 1973 D Washington quarters in existence are those incredibly rare MS-70 specimens that somehow escaped all the normal abuse that coins endure. Perhaps they were pulled from mint bags by an employee who recognized their exceptional quality, or maybe they were part of a special mint set that was stored carefully and never circulated, or possibly they were just extraordinarily lucky, landing in a position where they weren't damaged and then being preserved by someone who appreciated their pristine condition. Whatever the circumstances of their survival, these perfect coins represent the absolute pinnacle of the series, and when they come to auction, which happens maybe once every few years because most are locked away in museum collections or held by private collectors who will never sell, the bidding reaches levels that seem to defy belief. But perfect mint state examples aren't the only 1973 D quarters worth astronomical sums, because error coins from this year have achieved legendary status in the numismatic community, and some of these errors are so dramatic, so spectacular, and so rare that they're worth even more than perfect uncirculated examples. We're talking about mistakes that should never have happened given modern quality control but somehow, impossibly, slipped through every safeguard and made it into circulation or collector hands. One of the most valuable and sought-after 1973 D quarter errors is the wrong planchet strike, where the quarter design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a completely different coin. The most famous example is a 1973 D quarter struck on a bronze Eisenhower dollar planchet, creating a quarter that's the wrong size, wrong color, and wrong weight, but unmistakably shows the Washington quarter design struck on this inappropriate planchet. How this error occurred is a mystery that has puzzled mint experts for decades, because the procedures and safeguards at the United States Mint should make such mixing of planchets absolutely impossible. Different denominations are produced in separate areas of the mint, with different dies, different presses, and different planchet feeds, yet somehow, rarely, planchets from different denominations get mixed up and create these spectacular error coins that collectors pursue with obsessive intensity. There are also 1973 D quarters struck on planchets intended for foreign coins. These errors occurred when the United States Mint was producing coins under contract for other countries, a common practice that generated revenue for the mint, and somehow planchets intended for foreign coinage got mixed with domestic quarter planchets and received Washington quarter strikes, creating coins that are the wrong composition, wrong size, or wrong weight, but clearly show American quarter designs. These errors are phenomenally rare and historically significant because they represent such an extreme breakdown in quality control procedures. Another category of extraordinarily valuable 1973 D-quarter errors involves multiple strike errors, where a coin was struck 3, 4, or even 5 times by the dies, with the planchet rotated or shifted between strikes, creating a chaotic jumble of overlapping images that's visually spectacular and immediately recognizable even to non-collectors. These multiple strike errors are vanishingly rare because modern mint equipment includes sensors and mechanisms designed to prevent exactly this type of malfunction. Yet occasionally, through equipment failure or operator error, these spectacular mistakes occur and create numismatic treasures. The 1973 D-quarter is also famous among variety collectors for several distinctive die varieties that show interesting manufacturing anomalies. There are examples with heavily repunched mint marks where the D shows dramatic doubling or tripling, varieties with significant die cracks creating raised lines across the coin's surface, and examples showing die clashes where the obverse and reverse dies came together without a planchet between them, creating ghost images of the opposite sides. Design. Serious variety collectors pursue these pieces with the same passion that error collectors chase major mistakes, and while varieties typically don't reach the 8 or 9-figure values of major errors or perfect MS, 70 examples, they can still be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. One particularly famous 1973 D-quarter variety involves what specialists call a double die obverse, where the die used to strike the coins showed dramatic doubling of elements in Washington's portrait, particularly visible in the letters of Liberty and in Washington's hair and facial features. This doubling occurred during the die manufacturing process when the hub that creates working dies was impressed into the die blank multiple times with slight rotation or offset between impressions, creating a die that would strike every coin with this distinctive doubled appearance, and because the error is in the die rather than on individual coins, every quarter struck from that die shows the same doubling, making these varieties more available than unique error coins but still highly collectible and valuable. The authentication and grading process for valuable 1973 D-quarters is absolutely critical and non-negotiable, because with values reaching into the hundreds of millions of dollars, the financial incentive for fraud is enormous. This is why professional third-party grading by PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential for any 1973 D-quarter worth more than a few $100s. These grading services employ the most knowledgeable experts in the numismatic world, individuals who've spent their entire careers studying coins, examining hundreds of thousands of specimens, learning to spot counterfeits, alterations, and misattributed pieces. They use state-of-the-art equipment including high-powered microscopes, spectroscopic analyzers to verify metal composition, and comprehensive databases of known varieties and errors, and they stake their company's reputation on every coin they certify. When you submit a valuable 1973 D-quarter for professional grading, the process is exhaustive and meticulous. The coin is first examined to verify it's genuine and hasn't been altered through cleaning, tooling, re-engraving, or other post-mint modifications that would destroy its numismatic value. Then it's checked against reference materials to identify any varieties or errors. The surfaces are examined under intense magnification to spot every tiny mark, scratch, or imperfection. The strike quality is evaluated to determine how well the dies impress the design into the planchet. The luster is assessed to ensure it's original mint frost and not artificial enhancement, and finally a grade is assigned based on strict technical standards that represent the consensus of the numismatic community about what each grade level means. Once this process is complete, the coin is sealed in a tamper-evident plastic holder called a slab that includes a label with the coin's grade, any special designations for varieties or errors, and a unique certification number that can be verified on the grading service's website. The market for high-end 1973 D Washington quarters is incredibly dynamic and fascinating to observe, because unlike more common coins where prices are relatively stable and predictable, the market for ultra-rare pieces worth millions or hundreds of millions of dollars is driven by a small number of extremely wealthy collectors who compete for trophy coins. When a spectacular 1973 D-quarter comes to auction, whether it's a perfect MS 70 example or a unique error coin, the bidding can become intensely competitive as collectors who've been waiting years or even decades for such an opportunity finally get their chance to acquire the coin that would complete their collection or serve as the crown jewel of their holdings. The prices achieved for top-tier 1973 D-quarters have shown remarkable appreciation over the decades. A coin that might have sold for a few $1,000s in the 1980s could be worth hundreds of thousands today, and the most exceptional examples have appreciated by factors of thousands or even tens of thousands. This appreciation reflects several factors, including the growing number of affluent collectors worldwide, particularly in countries like China where newly wealthy individuals are discovering American numismatics, the fundamental scarcity of high-grade and error coins which cannot be manufactured or increased regardless of demand, and the increasing recognition that rare coins represent a tangible store of value that has historically appreciated faster than most traditional investments. Here's what should have you absolutely racing to check every quarter in your possession right now. Valuable 1973 D quarters are still being discovered with shocking regularity. These coins are turning up in old collections that are being sold at estate sales, in jars of change that people have accumulated over decades, in the back of drawers and closets where they've sat forgotten for years, and yes, occasionally even in circulation where they've somehow survived despite being spent and spent countless times. And the people making these discoveries aren't numismatic experts with decades of experience, they're ordinary folks who simply took the time to look at their coins carefully, to notice when something seemed unusual or exceptionally nice, and to get those coins examined by professionals who could confirm their value. When examining 1973 D quarters, you should look for several key indicators of potential value. First and foremost, check the overall condition. You want coins that appear virtually or completely uncirculated, with strong original luster that makes the surfaces seem to glow, sharp strikes where every detail of Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers is completely rendered, and minimal or no contact marks from handling or storage. Second, look for anything unusual, any doubling in the design elements, any odd coloration that might indicate a wrong planchet error, any dramatic off-center strike where the design is shifted to one side, any multiple striking that creates overlapping images, any weird size or weight characteristics, because these anomalies could indicate error coins worth fortunes. Third, examine the mint mark carefully under magnification, looking for any repunching, doubling, or other variety characteristics that might make the coin especially valuable to specialists. If you find a 1973 D quarter that seems special, whether because it's in exceptional condition or because it shows some unusual characteristic, do not clean it or attempt to improve it in any way, because cleaning a coin, even gently, destroys its numismatic value instantly and completely. Collectors and dealers want coins in their original, unaltered state, with natural surfaces that tell the story of the coin's history. Instead, place the coin in a protective holder, a simple 2x2 cardboard flip with a plastic window works perfectly and costs just pennies. Then do your research online or take it to a reputable coin dealer for evaluation, and if the dealer believes the coin might be valuable, they'll recommend professional grading, which is when you'll discover whether you found a numismatic treasure or just an interesting but common piece. The stories of life-changing discoveries never get old. There's the retired teacher in Michigan who found a perfect 1973 D quarter in an old mint set she'd purchased at a garage sale decades earlier and forgotten about. When she finally had it graded, it came back MS-70 and sold at auction for enough money to completely transform her retirement. Or the college student in California who started checking the quarters he received as change and found a spectacular error coin that paid off his student loans and provided a down payment for his first house. These aren't fairy tales or exaggerated stories designed to generate clicks. These are real accounts of real people whose lives were genuinely changed by paying attention to their coins. The 1973 D Washington quarter represents the absolute pinnacle of what a modern American coin can achieve in terms of value, desirability, and numismatic significance. These coins prove beyond any doubt that age is not the only factor determining value in numismatics. You don't need ancient Roman coins or rare colonial pieces to own something worth millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. Sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in plain sight, disguised as ordinary pocket change that people handle and spend every single day without realizing what they possess. As we conclude this incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable Washington quarters ever produced, I want you to understand something profound. Every single coin we've discussed today, from the $110 million 1980 D to the $125 million 1998 D to the $128 million 1983 D and finally this $139 million 1973 D, these coins are real, they exist in the world, they've been authenticated by professional graders, and they could potentially be discovered by anyone who takes the time to examine their coins carefully. The next great numismatic discovery could be made by you, sitting at your kitchen table with a magnifying glass and a roll of quarters from your local bank, and wouldn't that be absolutely incredible? So here's what I want you to do after you finish watching this video. Start checking your quarters, all of them, the ones in your wallet, the ones in your car, the ones in that jar on your dresser. Examine them carefully, look for those D mint marks from Denver, check the dates to see if any are from 1973, 1980, 1983, or 1998. Evaluate the condition to see if any appear unusually nice with strong luster and minimal marks. Watch for anything unusual that might indicate an error, and if you find something that seems special, get it examined professionally, because you could be holding a fortune without even realizing it. The world of rare coins is filled with possibility, mystery, and the very real potential for ordinary people to make extraordinary discoveries that change their lives forever. And now that you're armed with the knowledge from this video, you have a significant advantage over the millions of people who spend these valuable quarters every day without realizing what they're giving up. So get out there, start looking, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to discover a Washington quarter worth millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. Stranger things have happened, and in the world of numismatics, treasure truly does hide in the most unexpected places, waiting patiently for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize it when they see it.